What are the reasonable expectations for Kyle Wright? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. And you can catch us over on X at JohnnyJ_15. Again, that's JOHNYJ_15. Today's show is brought to you by wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And for you first-time listeners, I promise this is not where I typically do my show. We've got far better of a background to work with. These are some NBA jerseys behind me at the studio that I work at, 810 WHB. We are far more Royals-centric when it comes to our background, when it comes to our talk. Today, though, just going to have stuff going on this evening down in Kansas City. I'm actually going to the Big 12 tournament, so not going to have the time to record after work. Thought I'd bring in the computer to work and still talk a lot of Royals baseball, which is something that never changes no matter where we do our episodes. So again, for those first-time listeners, you can go check out our previous episodes on how we do our podcast, what segments we go over. But today, and I know it's a little bit of an issue because of the audio trouble we've been having, hopefully it holds up with the connection I have because it doesn't always work as well here in the studio. But we got to make with what we got here, and doing it here in the studio is what we're going to have to do today. And for the three segments we're going to be breaking down, we know that we are almost 2 weeks away. Actually, tomorrow we will officially be 2 weeks away from the start of the regular season, at least for the Royals. Next week, we'll get that Tokyo series, I believe, between the Dodgers and the Cubs. But with opening day, just a small amount of time away, there's not much more we're talking about other than roster battles for the bench spots and maybe some, preseason predictions that we may have. We'll actually be recording a AL Central preview coming up tomorrow. I believe that'll post the week of opening day, so you can keep your eye out for that. We did it last year. We now have a White Sox host, so everybody in the Central is going to be represented. But for what we'll be talking about in these final 2 weeks, it's not going to usually be about some big-time position battles. I feel pretty confident about who's going to be out there, who's not going to be out there. I've been evaluating which guys are banged up and how long those injuries may take to heal. And one of those guys that has been dealing with a minor injury in camp is Kyle Wright. And it is unfortunate. I know that the followers and the listeners out there have been asking a lot about him. You go back to his 2022 season, I want to say it was, where he won 20-plus games. He finished top 10 in Cy Young voting. It was an extraordinary year for Kyle Wright. And the Royals made the play last offseason to trade Jackson Kowar to Atlanta. Believe they ended up DFAing him. But Kyle Wright comes to Kansas City. They were fully aware he was not going to be pitching at all in 2024. And the target was for him to be ready by spring training in 2025, not opening day. Unfortunately, a hamstring injury has sidelined him for the majority of camp. And even when I was down there in Surprise, I didn't get to see Kyle Wright that often. And that brings me to this segment, which is evening out the expectations for what he might be able to provide in 2025. And I did get this segment idea from somebody who was asking questions about Kyle Wright in our episode yesterday, or at least in the YouTube comments below. And I wanted to give my thoughts on it, my opinions, because I also don't want to lead anybody astray or put hope into a player where there really doesn't need to be a ton of hope. For Kyle Wright, we have to be real with ourselves that 2022 was a long time ago. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, that was the outlier in his career. It was a phenomenal season, and few guys in the current day and age of baseball have won 20 games. He was able to do it for a postseason-bound Braves team. It was a great rotation. It was a great team, and he was able to stack up a lot of those W's. A part of being a great pitcher, that's obvious there, but to pitch for a lineup that had so many stars in it. And so you're racking up the win totals, and I'm one of those baseball fans that doesn't believe win totals is how you should evaluate a pitcher. I mean, the year Jacob deGrom had a sub-2 ERA, he won like 10 games, I believe it was, if that. He might have only won 9 games, and I remember it was such a big deal. How is he not winning games? Well, the lineup wasn't as good. Jason Vargas in the first half in 2017 was an all-star because of how many games he was winning, and his ERA was fine, but he was winning a ton of games, and he ended up with, I want to say, 18 or maybe 17 or 18 wins that season. To me, though, it's not a true measurement of to how good that player is or how good that pitcher is. And for Kyle Wright, I've already disassociated with that season and who he is today, right? Because after that 2022 season, he was not good in 2023, got hurt, then missed all of 2024. And now he's dealt with the hamstring injury in spring training. We haven't seen him yet. We haven't gotten a true evaluation of Kyle Wright in camp. And that's fine. They can go a little bit slower with him. They don't need to rush him. Their rotation is set. They have their number 6 starter. They have their number 7 starter. Hell, I might go as far to say they've got 3 starters outside the top 5 that are ahead of Kyle Wright. If you are somebody out there, and it's not that it's a bad take, but if you are somebody out there that believes Kyle Wright is going to be a staple in the rotation, I have to lead you in a different direction. I believe that Kyle Wright is much closer to what Chris Medlin was than any of the guys that have been coming off injury before and competing for a spot for the Royals over the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, Chris Medlin, yes, the Royals wanted him to be a starter, and he got a few spot starts, but in the end, he was more so of a long reliever. Kyle Wright, to me, will do that exact same thing if he stays healthy. That's still a very big if when it comes to him. The shoulder injury, recovering from that shoulder surgery, was already a big enough deal. And there's a reason the Royals were able to work out a trade with Atlanta and gave up Jackson Kowar, who had never proven at the big league level that he was stable enough, that he was able to find a spot in the bullpen and any sort of role or to stick in the rotation for a really bad Royals team, I might add. With Kyle Wright, the first step for him is just staying healthy. Then you go to step number 2, which is pitching well in AAA, which is where I imagine he will go once he wraps up in Surprise. And who knows, he might stay a little bit later in Surprise just to build back up, make sure he's ready to go pitch in live action down in Omaha. But that's step 2 here. Step 3 is the Royals having an opening somewhere. I mean, you've heard me say the term, there's a world in which. I say that a lot. It's one of my crutch terms I use on this podcast. I have a lot of them, by the way. Sometimes I don't even know I'm saying it, and I just go back and listen, and I found out I've said it about 10 to 15 times throughout the episode. But this bullpen is better than it was last year. And as I've said before, even though it's unrealistic, on opening day, you're not going to have the same rotation you had and the same bullpen you had by the end of the year. Guys get banged up. Guys miss significant time. Guys end up struggling and you have to demote them or you have to outright release them. And there can be an opening that comes about in the Royals bullpen, or there's a spot in the rotation that opens up. And Kyle Wright could take one of those spots. However, there are just other guys in line that would prevent him from starting a ton of games for the Royals. I'm not saying it's impossible. You could see him have a spot start some point in the summer or late in the season, almost as that attaboy of, let's see what he looks like. Maybe he can be a number 6 or number 7 starter for us moving forward. Maybe you don't have to wait as long as September. Maybe it can be middle of the season. But when you have this 5, Ragans, Lugo, Waka, Lorenzen, and Bubic, Lynch is the 6, Marsh is the 7, Noah Cameron might be the 8. And for a quicker path to Kansas City, It might be just focusing on pitching out of the bullpen. His stuff could play well there. He's got a good curveball. I don't know what the velocity looks like. He didn't pitch last year, and he hasn't pitched in spring training. If he starts ramping it back up and he's only sitting 87, 88, 89, which it's hard to come back from shoulder surgery. You go read a ton of stories out there about guys that have had this exact same surgery and they never rebounded. I believe it was John Danks for the White Sox that had this same type of surgery. He never was the same. I want to say it was John Danks. So again, the expectations need to be lowered for Kyle Wright out of courtesy to him. Right? We can't view him the same guy that he was 3 years ago. That is in the past. That is a distant memory. He has the capability, but he's older, and he's dealt with more injuries, and he's got to get healthy first. Then it's about ramping it up. Then it's about the numbers. Then it's about a spot opening up in Kansas City. It might be a while before we see Kyle Wright, and who knows? I don't have all the answers. Maybe a spot never opens up. Maybe he never gets healthy. Maybe the numbers are never there. But for those out there clamoring for him to grab a rotation spot, I know the majority of you are doing it based off what he did in 2022. That's a long time ago. That just in baseball, that is a long, long time ago. Guys that were great back then may not even be in baseball anymore, or they may not even be at the big league level anymore. Injuries can change a pitcher's path. We all know that. And for Kyle Wright, he's got to focus on getting healthy first. And I believe he's making the right steps to ensure that. It's not just that, though. It's roster openings. It's also having the numbers in AAA, which is where I believe, when healthy, he's going to be going to. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I'll tell you somebody that is not banged up and is looking really good in camp. That's Cole Ragans. He was pumping 99 yesterday, 4 clean innings, a lot of strikeouts. In fact, the only time he was hit around in his final inning was due to 2 sunballs, if I'm not mistaken. We'll tell you about his start and what to expect from him next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor and the title sponsor today in Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, where each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep you feeling fuller longer. So go get snackin and get crackin today with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Again, that is wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more about the snack that keeps you fuller longer. The next segment we're going to be switching over to is about the ace of the Royals rotation, which is Cole Ragans. And one of my favorite things about Cole Ragans in every single one of his starts, whether it be spring training, the regular season, or the postseason, he fluctuates so much with the velocity. And there was a point in time, and I want to say June, maybe it was May. Now that I think about it, I believe it was May. And the velocity was dipping a little bit. There was one start on a Friday night at home against Oakland where he comes out in the first inning, and he's throwing 93, 94. It's brought to my attention, though I was watching the game, so I'm seeing the 93 pop up, the 94, and I'm going, man, that is a bit concerning, especially when on opening day he's throwing 98, 99. There's the stigma with hard throwers of when they're sitting at 97, 98 all game long, it could lead to more injuries. The human arm is just not able to do that for 10 consecutive years or even 5 consecutive years and not have some form of fatigue or some form of injury. And so in that start with Ragans, he's sitting 93, 94 in the first and second. And then by pitch 97 or 98, he's back up to 97 or 98. And he continues this for the entirety of the season, where first inning, I might come out there and throw 98, 99. And then in the third inning, I might rely on my cutter a bit more, my changeup, which is my best put away pitch. And then my velocity's down. And then it's back up again. And the more I watched him do this, the more genius I believe it was. Because Cole Ragans already has, in my opinion, four-ish really good pitches. The fastball's very good. The changeup's very good. The knuckle curve's very good. And the slider and the cutter feel interchangeable. But I'll play it safe with four. When you have a fastball that has the ability to get to 98, 99, and maybe even at one point 100, and you also can locate it well at 93, 94, it's almost two additional pitches. Because when you're a hitter game planning for facing Cole Ragans, you already know how good of a pitcher he is. He's a strikeout pitcher. He's been able to harness the command. And the changeup you got to worry about. The knuckle curve you got to worry about. And this fastball you have to prepare for. And I believe it allowed him to go deeper into the season. It allowed him to go deeper into starts where he can take a little bit off the fastball to preserve his arm a bit longer. And in one of his spring training starts, he's throwing a lot of cutters. He's throwing changeups. He's sitting 94, 95 with the fastball. And then yesterday, it just appeared it was one of those starts where he wanted to throw hard. And he's throwing 98, 99, 99, 99, almost got to 100. And in fact, if it was on television, if it was broadcasted, it would have been 100 because it was 99.9, and they always round up on the TV broadcast. He was pumping that hard in Arizona yesterday. And he had 4 clean innings, and he struck out 5 or 6. He had a clean 3 innings in his previous outing, so you know he's good to go. He's ready to go. You can bubble wrap him, get him ready to go for opening day against the Cleveland Guardians. But for those out there concerned about that dip, I believe it's more so about his preference of, I know I still have 98, 99 in the tank. But to have those two different pitches, think about how discombobulating that is as a hitter. If I'm going up there having to worry about 99 from a pitcher, not to mention throwing from the left side, it is always, tougher for a hitter to face a lefty throwing 99, 100 than it is a righty. There's just less lefties in the game that can do that. And for Cole Ragans to have that and a changeup that dives away from right-handed hitters or down and into left-handed hitters, he's got the knuckle curve and slider going away from lefties and going in toward the back foot of righties. Now I got to pick up if this fastball's coming in at 99 or 93, a 6-mile-an-hour difference. That is a different pitch. It almost certainly looks like a different pitch. And when he puts it where he wants, that's why you see these ugly swings. You see these uncomfortable swings from hitters as they're trying to pick up what pitch it is. I mean, Seth Lugo is so effective having those 8 or 9 pitches he throws. You're having to worry about, oh, no, is it the cutter? Is it the sinker? Is it the curveball? Is it the changeup? Is it the four seam? Is it the slider? Is it the splitter? I mean, these pitchers are going in all different directions, which is why I'm not overly concerned about a Seth Lugo regression. It's never been about velocity. It's been about the spin on his pitches, the command of those off-speed pitches, and you can pitch into your late 30s if you can locate it well and you're still getting that spin on the ball. With Cole Ragans, that's one way that he can really succeed and give himself another great opportunity to win the Cy Young. He is a 200-plus strikeout pitcher. He is a 180 to 200 inning guy. He is, by every definition, an ace of not just the Royals. He's an ace in all of baseball. He's a game 1 starter. We saw that in Baltimore. And if it would have lined up, he would have been the game 1 starter in New York. He ended up being the game 2 starter. Walker started game 1. But you get to the World Series and you're rested up, he's getting the ball game 1. And I got asked that question of who started opening day. It's Cole Ragans. Even though it's not been publicly announced, that's who it's going to be. If it was him last year, after you had already brought in Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, it's going to be him again after the season he just turned in. So with Cole Ragans, a big part in ensuring health, ensuring that you're not running on fumes by the end of the year, is having that ability, because not everybody can. You would think that Tarek Skubal, for example, who throws 100 with regularity, he can take off 5, 6, 7 miles an hour and it's still the same. No, I believe he's somebody that has the strength of, I'm going to throw 100 every single inning I can. And if I lose a little bit in the 6th, I lose a little bit. I still have a lot of strikeout pitches. With Cole Ragans, I want to say he uses it to his advantage. You're the leadoff hitter of the game. Well, he might be throwing 99. He also might be throwing 93. He also may be relying on the changeup or the cutter, and I got to be prepared for that as well. That's why I'm so high on him, and why we'll do an episode later on next week about who has a better chance to win the Cy Young or the MVP, Cole Ragans or Bobby Witt Jr. But I'm stoked. I'm absolutely pumped for what I saw yesterday. He is 100% ready to go. Can't wait to see him climb the bump on opening day. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, how long will the leash be for some of the guys that we all know are going to be under a microscope in 2025? I'll tell you who they are next and how long that leash is on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor today in Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. That's Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already talking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code ACESH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com, and go get started today. This has been something that's on everybody's mind, including myself, including people around the organization, more so covering the team. It's an obvious statement. I'm not, breaking any ground here. I'm not breaking any news, that's for sure. But how long is the leash going to be for the guys that we all know are going to be looked at differently going into 2025? Bobby Witt Jr. safe. He's not under a microscope. Maybe from a national perspective, being in the MVP race, he will be under a microscope, but not when it comes to Royals fans and roster moves you may make. I don't even believe Jonathan India or Michael Massey or Vinny Pasquantino have to worry about that either. Salvador Perez definitely doesn't. Lugo, Walker, Ragans, they're not under a microscope. It's about this outfield. We all know this outfield was not good last year. And this outfield has to produce at least one above-average hitter for this team to get back to the postseason. I would like to sit here and say that even if they put together the same offensive production as last year, the Royals can make it to the postseason. I believe that would be foolish to do. You have to have advantages in every little margin if you're to make the wild card or win the American League Central, because this division is so tight. It's going to be close all the way to the end. You have to have those tiny margins with Detroit, with Minnesota, with Cleveland. You got to have the extra bullpen guy. You have to have that 9-hole hitter that can turn over the lineup effectively. You got to have that setup guy or that number 4, number 5 starter just better than the other team. And for the Royals, they got 3 outfielders that were well below average offensively last season. MJ Melendez, Kyle Isbell, Hunter Renfroe. Barring any injuries, they are going to be on the opening day roster, and I would venture a guess that 2 of them will be starting. It all comes down to, will Jonathan India start in left field on opening day? And would that move Melendez to right field, or will Renfroe start in right field? We'll have to see with that. Same thing goes for Isbell. Would they start Maikel Garcia against a lefty in center field? Because Kyle Isbell and Melendez, for that matter, were not good against lefties last year at all. They were putting up pitcher numbers when pitchers used to hit against left-handed pitchers. But the leash, when talking about how long the Royals would give them, a lot of it would come down to what their record is. I'm putting a cap at 2 months. A lot of Royals fans are going to be jumping on those guys if they're not good at the end of April. For me, when you're looking at the extensiveness of a 162-game schedule, 1 month isn't going to dictate how a player is the rest of the year. And that's if they have a track record or they don't. You can't fall victim to a guy hitting 380, unless it's Bobby Witt Jr., I guess, in the first month of the season. And you can't always fall victim if they're hitting a $170. It's cold weather. The Royals are going to be going to Detroit. They're going to be going to Cleveland. I want to say they go to New York as well. It's going to be cold in that first month of the season. That's going to favor the pitcher. When you are looking at these three guys, I've got my list as to those that can bounce back, that have the best ability to bounce back. I started with Melendez. He's younger. He's got the power in his bat. He's made the changes. He's more durable than the other two. That's why I would say he has the best chance to bounce back. His leash is going to be a little bit longer. If he's hitting 215, it actually wouldn't be that bad after the first month. Let's go a little bit harsher. If he's hitting a $160 after April and he's striking out 35% of the time, I believe the Royals would make the move to not play him every single day. That would demote him to the lower levels. And now you have to factor in that Jack Caglione's a big-time prospect. He has shown in spring training that he might be able to come up as early as the summer of 2025. That's another part that you have to consider. If he's hitting 380 to 400 in the first month of the season, that clock's ticking. They're not going to be holding him down long if he is crushing AA and AAA pitching, and you've got guys in the outfield that just aren't carrying their own weight or hitting their own weight for that matter. So Melendez has the best chance. The second best chance, in my opinion, is Hunter Renfroe. Hunter Renfroe, after an ugly start in April last year, really turned it on in the month of May. We saw him be a top three hitter in that lineup when he was healthy. He was putting together very professional and strong ABs. The power was there. The walk rate was there. You could hit him anywhere from 5 to 7 in the lineup, and he was consistent. Then he got hurt, and he returned to the April form of Hunter Renfroe. He's also done it before at the big league level. He has been a good, above-average hitter as early as 2 years ago. Now, as I said with Kyle Wright, we have to come full circle here. Is Hunter Renfroe the same guy he was in 22 and 23? He's not. You have to take him for who he is now, and maybe that's a platoon hitter. Maybe the Royals end up platooning both Melendez and Renfroe if they continue to struggle as everyday players. With Kyle Isbell, he will have, I would say, a medium-length leash because his defense is so good. I will bring this in, though. If Michael Garcia can handle center field and he is putting up far better numbers offensively, there would be reason then to move Kyle Isbell off the everyday role. You can live with average defense in center field if Michael Garcia is truly hitting. It just really does matter on a lot of things. How Jack Caglione looks, what the Royals' record is. That's something I need to go back to as well, because that was the first point I made. If the Royals are 20 games over 500 and those guys are struggling, the leash is going to be longer because you have the buffer room. You can lose 5 of 10, and even though you don't want to slip too far, but you can work things out when you're 20 games over 500. And those guys would be bound to have a good week or two or a good month. We saw it even last year with all three of them. Some of them put together 2 good months. But if you are winning at an extraordinary rate, you're winning, 20 of 25. You're 15 to 20 games over 500 in July or in June, and those guys are still struggling, you might be better off letting them work through it. Now I bring this up again. If Jack Caglione is hitting his ass off in AAA and Hunter Renfroe is not hitting well, that's the move they would make. That just would be the reality. If Jack Caglione can help this roster, can help this lineup, the Royals are not going to hold him down. There is no manipulating the service time there. When he's ready, they'll put him up there. And it would be easier to cut bait with somebody that is not under contract next year, is older than the other two, and if he's struggling, he's not giving you much defensively out there. Then you'd have Jack Caglione in right. You could have MJ Melendez out there, or India in left field, or Massey in left field. Maybe you're platooning Garcia and Isbell. But to me, those factors all matter in this. The Royals' record, what Jack Caglione looks like. And if it's all three of them, if all three of them are struggling, then you are going to need to make a roster move. If they're closer to Detroit and Minnesota and Cleveland, and it's a tight race, you might need to make that decision a little bit earlier and sooner than expected. We'll see how it all plays out. Best case scenario, none of those guys struggle. We just know that it's probably not likely. But I would say the realistic scenario, one of those guys is much better than they were last year. But we'll see. Maybe I'm just having the blind loyalty to some of those guys. All right, that'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast with host Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB Fantasy Draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to continue more of our spring training talk, and who knows, might take a bigger look at the AL Central with that preview that is going to be coming up here in the next few weeks. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.